What if I told you that psychiatric illnesses could partly, largely, or even entirely be caused by dietary choices? Anything from depression and anxiety to brain fog and even schizophrenia has now been proven to lessen with dietary changes. Now, I'm not pulling this out of nowhere. This video is based on the new groundbreaking 2024 book, Change Your Diet, Change Your Mind, by Dr. Georgia Ede, who is an internationally recognized expert in nutritional and metabolic psychiatry with 25 years of clinical experience. Before we get into any of the practical tips that I will give you throughout this video, we first need to learn why this is the case. Why would diet help with any of this, and the real chemical way food affects our brain? Part 1. Rethinking food. There is a global crisis. Nearly 1 billion people all across the globe have a mental illness, and research shows that both mental and physical health has been on the decline since the 1950s. Now, some people may chop this down due to lifestyle stress, but frankly, this isn't the whole story. We do have modern stressors like social media, which definitely do play an impact, but if we take a real look at what's happening, we've always been stressed, and arguably, I think humans were more stressed in the past. Do you really think social media is harder to manage than maybe 100 years ago or 200 years ago when we had all these illnesses that we couldn't cure? No, I'd rather live in the modern world compared to a couple hundred years ago. And let's look at the medications. Only about half of the people who take antidepressants actually benefit from them, and the improvements of antidepressants are barely measurable compared to placebo. And with this lack of efficacy, we've uncovered new biological clues. Mental illness may not just be a neurotransmitter problem, but it may stem from deeper biological issues like inflammation, oxidative stress, and insulin resistance. Think about it. The brain is literally made out of nutrients. Neurotransmitters like dopamine come from tyrosine, which we get from food. So one of the most powerful ways to change your brain with the least amount of side effects is to simply change your diet. Since all brain cells, neurotransmitters, and the fluids around them are made of nutrients. For better mental health, the first place to look isn't the medicine cabinet, but rather your pantry. Now, as a caveat, I'm not anti-medicine, I'm not anti-drug. My personal stance outside of anything that this book tells you is, how about we try to fix our brains with diet first? And if you've genuinely tried and gave it all with diet and still nothing is working, then go to drugs. Why take substances to cure an illness when we can first do it naturally? Why would you take amphetamines for brain fog if your brain fog is simply caused by poor sleep and poor diet choices? Why drink excess caffeine to wake up when you're only sleeping 4 hours a night? Same deal, right? So what are the metabolic roots of mental illness? Many of the points that I will be making here are severely summarized so as to not make a 12-hour video, but if you do want more details and more convincing descriptions, just go read the book Change Your Diet, Change Your Mind. But in short, many psychiatric disorders involve poor brain energy metabolism, where the brain struggles to burn glucose effectively. And the main culprit behind this is insulin resistance, caused initially by diets high in refined carbohydrates, like sugar, flour, cereals, and juices, and then later on expanded by obesity. In a roundabout irony, the more sugar you eat, the fatter you get, the less your brain can use it as fuel. This is where the ketogenic diet comes in as brain therapy. Essentially, keto diets train the body to burn fat as fuel, producing ketones that the brain can use when glucose metabolism falters. Originally, the diet was used to treat epilepsy in 1921. And so the theory was, since bipolar disorder and epilepsy shared biological similarities, keto could also stabilize mood swings and support mental stability. With this in mind, here are the 3 criteria of a brain healthy diet. Number 1. It nourishes and provides all of the necessary nutrients. Number 2, it protects, avoiding ingredients that inflame the brain. And number 3, it energizes by supporting steady blood sugar levels. Now, following the criteria, there are 3 diets that this book is going to recommend. The quiet paleo diet, which is meat, fish, eggs, low toxin fruits and vegetables. The quiet keto diet, which is just a very low carb version of the quiet paleo diet. And the quiet carnivore diet, which is 100% animal based and takes away every food sensitivity that could be triggering your body. Now, we will cover these later, but to truly improve mental health, we must rethink everything that we've been taught about diets. And changing your brain starts with changing your beliefs about food. Our nutrition has and will continue to be politicized. Since the 1950s, after President Eisenhower's heart attack, research shifted from studying micronutrients to demonizing fat and cholesterol, which paved the way for decades of flawed dietary advice. Now, to better understand dietary research, it's best that we also understand the different types of nutritional studies and their limitations. First, there's case reports, which describe individual or small group results. There's observational or epidemiology, observational or why is that so hard to say? Observational or epidemiology studies, which rely on food questionnaires and correlations, non-randomized trials, where groups aren't chosen randomly, randomized control trials, which are the gold standard, but they're very difficult and expensive to conduct, and meta-analyses, which take in a group of randomized control trials and use them as data. So why do so many nutritional studies fail? Well, even if we take the randomized control trial, the gold standard research, there are three different issues that we will run into. The first is the control problem. You can't isolate one single thing. If you change anything about food, you also change the calories of the diet, you change the nutrients of the diet. There's a lot of variables. Number two is the blinding problem. You can't hide real foods like bananas or eggs. People generally know what they're going to be eating. It's not a pill. And lastly, there is a time and place problem. Long-term controlled food studies on humans are nearly impossible to conduct. You would have to subject humans to a metabolic ward, literally lock them up in a food prison of sorts, and have them live there for years. Are you gonna do that? How much money would I have to pay you, right? So keeping this in mind, let's cover a classic example, the rabbit cholesterol myth. In the 1900s, researchers found that rabbits, who are herbivores may I add, developed artery deposits when fed cholesterol. Now, if you have an IQ higher than 7, you may come to realize that rabbits aren't designed whatsoever to eat animal fat. So these results don't apply to humans. This flawed research shaped anti-cholesterol propaganda for years to come. Let me give you another one. What about the blueberry study? Harvard found that women who reported eating more blueberries had better memory on average. But take a look at the questionnaire of this study. This was very vague over a very long period of time, and it was all self-reported data. Now, are you telling me that middle-aged women are not going to try to make themselves seem healthier on nutritional studies? Take a look at the paper. Studies like these only show association, not actual effects. And frankly, I can't remember what I ate a week ago, so how do you expect all these people to know what they ate throughout an entire year? You ask yourself, how many bowls of blueberries have you eaten in the last year? And so these weak correlations are often exaggerated into major headlines that frankly just make good pieces of media. Now, with this in mind, we should also speak about the relative risk of foods. Real scientific cause and effect risks like smoking and lung cancer will show huge differences. For example, 8 to 30 times higher. Now, many of these nutritional studies that will blame animal products will show a 1.2 to 1.3 times increased risk, which then will be inflated into headlines which will say something like eggs cause heart attacks, 20% increased chance. When looked through a scientific lens, a 1.2 to 1.3 times increase is basically statistically insignificant, but it does make for good headlines. So the better sources of truth instead of media headlines are reliable insights that come from biochemistry, physiology, neuroscience, anthropology, and cell biology. The key to mental and physical health is to base your diet on human biology and not diet ideology. Keeping this in mind, let's cover protein and amino acids. We eat protein not for the protein itself, but for the amino acids that we get from the protein. These amino acids are broken down and then we rebuild them into tissues, hormones, and most importantly for the topic of this video, neurotransmitters. If you lack key nutrients like iron or B6, your brain will literally not be able to make enough neurotransmitters, leading to mood or behavioral problems. I'll put up a picture on screen of a little diagram from the book, and you can clearly see that if you want to make serotonin, you're gonna first need L-tryptophan from your diet, which then you need iron to convert into 5-HTP and vitamin B6 to turn into serotonin. Look at dopamine and its requirements for tyrosine and iron. everything requires nutrients. So here I come to piss a lot of vegans off. Animal proteins contain all essential amino acids. Many plant proteins are incomplete, often low in methionine, cysteine, or lysine, making it harder to build everything that the brain needs. Now this video, since it is based off of this book and my own diet, I don't really agree with the vegan diet and neither does this book, so there's nothing wrong with that, but personally, if you want to be vegan, you should probably go find another video because that is out of the scope of this video. There's a lot of supplementation that you need with the vegan diet. You need to be very careful with your food choices. So once again, if you're vegan, go to a different video. All love and respect though. Let's talk about fat, carbs, and energy storage. When you eat a lot of carbs, your liver doesn't just let them float around. It turns them into saturated fats for storage. And that is your body's way of keeping energy compact and ready for use. So saturated fat isn't inherently bad because your body literally makes it as an energy reserve. Now what about cholesterol? Cholesterol is crucial for neurotransmitter communication, and 20% of your brain is made out of cholesterol, and your brain doesn't rely on food for it. It actually makes its own cholesterol and has its own regulatory system. And lastly, glucose. Your brain does need glucose, but you don't need to eat carbs to generate glucose. You can make glucose from fats and proteins through gluconeogenesis. So carbs are optional. They're not really essential to your diet. Now, as a fun side tangent, I'm an athlete, right? So I'm not anti-carb whatsoever. I think they do have a place in a lot of people's diets. And I also will give you some of the caveats and limitations that I have found within this book. I'm not just going to meat ride the author throughout the entire video. But here's a little story. I remember my brother coming home from school one day. He sat me down and he said to me,
"So we had a nutrition class, right? And you won't believe what my teacher said. She said that carbs are the most important nutrient and should make up the majority of our diets."
Now, even if you're a keto hater, even if you're against low carb, you can probably see why we shouldn't really be trusting our prior nutritional knowledge when teachers like this exist. But tangent aside, what are the core nutritional needs for a brain healthy diet? First, we need complete proteins and enough protein to make neurotransmitters, as previously mentioned. The amino acid L-tyrosine will get converted into L-dopa, which then gets converted into dopamine. We need healthy fats, which requires a good ratio of omega 3 to 6s. We need all the micronutrients, all the vitamins, and we also need a sufficient amount of electrolytes. So let's speak about insulin and macronutrients. Carbs spike insulin the most, protein somewhere in the middle, and fats, they don't spike insulin at all. The more refined a carbohydrate, think the more sugary it is, the more processed it is, the more junk food it is, the more it's going to spike your insulin. And this is important because what you eat directly correlates to how your brain uses that energy. In short, the more sugary your diet is, the more refined carbohydrate you have in your diet, the higher your blood sugar is going to be, the higher your insulin levels are going to spike, and thus it's going to lead to feelings of lethargy, brain fog, it's going to leave you feeling stupid, and we don't want any of this. This is where keto and ketones come in. When insulin drops and ketones level rise, your brain switches from using glucose as energy to ketones for energy. And so using ketones has been shown to increase autophagy, which is essentially cell cleanup. It boosts your immune system and also improves neuroplasticity, which is your ability to learn anything. Modern diets intentionally by design put people into a high glucose, high insulin, and low ketone state, which can dull mental clarity and destabilize your mood. By regularly spending time in mild ketosis, you can help your brain regain clarity, stabilize mood, and lower insulin resistance. If you're not really convinced yet that lowering your insulin spikes really helps with anything, here's a more practical way to think about it. Just think how tired you get after eating a large bowl of rice or a large meal full of pasta. If you eat a bunch of bread after a large meal, really think about it. Do you feel energized or do you feel tired? Because I'm pretty sure most of us feel tired, right? We have a huge dinner and we're ready to go to sleep. Now think what would happen if you ate that exact same meal for breakfast. Would you be ready to take on the day? No, you would probably want to sleep. And that is the cause of the insulin spike. If you're really about this, if you're really dedicated, try this test. Next morning when you wake up, don't eat anything for 2 to 4 hours and try to do a cognitive activity. Matter of fact, you can do anything. Don't eat for the 2 to 4 hours and realize how sharp your mind is. And after a few hours go by, go eat a large carb meal. Go have some cereal, have some bread, have some rice, and then try to do the same task again. You're gonna realize that your brain is super foggy and it feels like it's 10 times more difficult to accomplish the same task. Once again, I really urge you to try this. This will really reinforce the power of this book. It will reinforce the power of this video. And trust me, realizing how big of a mental impact carbs make to your brain is life-changing information. More directly changing when you can actually feel the impact minute to minute. Part 2, our descent into dietary madness. We need to understand processed foods. Processed foods aren't just junk. They're more like Trojan horses for the brain. They're nutrient poor, but loaded with a bunch of toxins that harm both your brain function and metabolism. And refined sugars are absolutely everywhere. And a lot of these foods are hidden under various different names. If you take refined sugars, for example, it's not going to say sugar on the ingredient label. Instead, it's going to be corn syrup, dextrose, malt, or nectar. These refined carbs spike your insulin like nothing else. And these spikes cause mass inflammation and leave you mentally foggy. Referring back to the experiment that I told you to try. Fast in the morning after sleeping and then have a high carb meal. See how you feel. You're gonna be foggy as hell. And then to add gas to the fire, when you mix in all of these refined carbs with vegetable oils, which are also very highly inflammatory, it's a perfect storm for oxidative stress, which disrupts your brain energy and neurotransmitter balance. Now, speaking of seed oils, a lot of junk food nowadays is made with a bunch of seed oils. Every food in restaurants is typically packed full of seed oils. These oils are very high in linoleic acid, an omega-6 that promotes inflammation, compared to the omega-3s, DHA and EPA that reduce inflammation. Nowadays, the omega-6 to omega-3 ratio, the inflammation to non-inflammation ratio, is roughly 20 to 1, where in the past it was closer to 2 to 1. This imbalance has been proven to worsen depression, anxiety, and overall mood instability. Now let me say this again. Omega-6 is not bad for you. It's a pro-inflammatory fat that is needed. Some inflammation is needed. Without inflammation, being sick would be horrible. Building muscle would be nearly impossible. Your body requires inflammation. But ever since we started using seed oils, which are high in linoleic acid, and started eating less omega-3 rich foods like fatty fish, our omega-6 to omega-3 ratio jumped from 2 to 1 to 20 to 1, putting us in an extremely highly inflammatory state. And for the people that are gonna go to the grave saying that seed oils aren't bad for you, you know what? You're right. Seed oils aren't necessarily bad for you. They're technically not bad for you. But for every 10 grams of sunflower oil or any other seed oil that you are eating, I better see your ass eating 500 grams of salmon on the side to make sure you have that 2 to 1 balance. And here's a fun fact. One pack of Oreos has 15 to 20 grams of seed oils. That's super high in omega-6s. So to counteract that and get a nice omega-6 to omega-3 ratio, you would have to eat around 1,000 grams of salmon. But that's enough. Here are some practical brain protecting steps that you could follow. The first thing you should do is eliminate ultra-processed foods. Anything with sugar, flour, and seed oils. Cook at home using natural oils like butter, tallow, olive oil, and coconut oil. Read labels carefully for hidden sugars. Balance omega-3s and omega-6s by eating more fatty fish, eggs, and grass-fed meat, and stabilize your blood sugar with low-carb, whole food meals to calm down inflammation. Every spike of glucose will also correlate with an insulin spike, and the less metabolically healthy you are, the more these insulin spikes are going to be debilitating to your mental health. Essentially, the fatter you are, the less exercise you do, the more you should be worried about these insulin spikes, as they're gonna make you feel worse compared to someone who exercises every day. Let's speak more on insulin resistance. It isn't just something that happens in your muscles or liver, it affects your brain too. When insulin stays chronically high, the insulin receptors at the blood-brain barrier can become resistant. The result? Well, less insulin actually makes it into your brain. Counterintuitive as it sounds, the higher your blood insulin, the lower your brain insulin. But why does this matter? Brain cells rely on insulin to process glucose into energy and building blocks. Without insulin in the brain, we can't use the glucose that we have. And so this creates an energy shortage of sorts called cerebral glucose hypometabolism. In other words, your brain can literally be starving even though sugar is very abundant in your bloodstream. And PET scans time and time again confirm this. The more insulin resistant the body, the less glucose there is within the brain. Blood sugar may be high, but brain energy is low. And so this mismatch can affect your focus, memory, mood, and overall cognitive function. Who is the most affected here? Studies show sluggish brain glucose processing in people with ADHD since childhood, borderline personality disorder, and OCD, especially those who have hoarding behaviors. So the takeaway here is that insulin resistance isn't just a metabolic issue. It's a brain issue, and addressing it could improve brain function and support treatment for multiple psychiatric conditions. And this isn't new science. Researchers have been studying the brain benefits of metabolic approaches since 1921, long before the widespread use of psychiatric medication. Unlike drugs, which often target a single neurotransmitter or a single pathway, the ketogenic diet works on various different brain problems all at once, giving it a broad and powerful effect. Here are some of the brain benefits of ketosis. It reduces inflammation, boosts antioxidant defenses, partially bypasses damaged mitochondria, repairs and replenishes mitochondria, supports neuroplasticity, improves sensory gating, in other words, reduces hallucinations, rebalances neurotransmitters, stabilizes brain cell networks, lowers sodium inside neurons, making them less reactive, and bridges the brain glucose energy gap. Now, as I mentioned, I will give you the caveats of this entire book. One limitation I have found to the ketogenic diet thus far is it isn't the best for athletes and bodybuilders. So if you're very preoccupied with your physique, and I don't mean, oh, I want to lose some fat, build some muscle, I mean you have been lifting for years, and you are an intermediate or an advanced lifter and you really want to push athletically. There, it wouldn't necessarily make sense for you to follow very, very low carb diets. From what I hear in athletes, from a lot of anecdotal reports, there is evidence that unfortunately the ketogenic diet will lower your testosterone. And insulin and inflammation is unfortunately very crucial in the development of new muscle tissue. That being said, if you are not a professional athlete or you haven't been training for a decade and you want to progress further, then this doesn't really concern you. I will do more research and make a follow-up video to this entire topic if you guys want, but so far, unless you are a nearly professional athlete or you're very preoccupied with muscle growth, you can definitely follow this ketogenic diet or even lower your carbohydrate intake. As another side tangent, every single research study that I have read that supports that the ketogenic diet increases testosterone levels or produces any positive effects towards muscle growth is typically in very fat, untrained people who end up losing weight and thus increasing their testosterone because of that. It's more of a case where they went from worse to better. They went from fat to keto. Part 3. The whole truth about whole foods. Humans are omnivores and our brains evolved to require animal-based foods. Red meat isn't just fuel. It is quite literally by definition a superfood. It has so many of the micronutrients and macronutrients that your body needs, many of which are impossible to get from standard plant foods like vitamin B12 and DHA. On screen you will see a nutrient profile of meat. You can look this over, but overall meat is fantastic. It's very easy to digest, it doesn't spike blood sugar, it supports stable insulin levels, and is safe for the kidneys even when eaten in excess. No, protein does not destroy your kidneys, guys. This has been proven time and time again. You can eat hundreds of grams of protein without issue. Here are some myths about red meat. First, we have heart disease. Epidemiological studies show tiny or non-meaningful links between unprocessed meat and cardiovascular risk. Saturated fat in meat does not negatively affect your health. And concerns about carnitine and TMAO mostly come from unrealistic mouse studies that do not really translate well to humans. Next is cancer. Rodent studies show that red meat does not cause cancer, and instead it may be a calcium deficiency issue due to eating red meat. But once again, rodent studies, has it been directly applied to humans? No. Also, some people say it's heme iron. Heme iron causes cancer. Well, that hasn't been proven either. Other people will say nitrates and nitrites, but nitrates and nitrites exist in higher amounts within vegetables such as spinach and celery. Here are some other myths. Meat causes constipation. Meat is literally the easiest food to digest, and if anything causes constipation, it's the fiber from plants in your diet which is indigestible. Just in case you don't know, the literal definition of something that is fibrous is something that we cannot digest. A piece of grass is fiber. Would you have digestive issues if you ate grass? Most likely. Hypertension, low carb diets high in meat have been shown time and time again to reduce your blood pressure. Kidney disease, high protein, once again, as said, is completely safe for your kidneys. The real culprit is hyperglycemia, having too high of blood sugar and elevated blood pressure. Inflammation. Meta-analyses show that red meat does not cause inflammation. It's blood sugar spikes that are the true culprit of inflammation. Now let's cover why meat is good for you. Red meat is a time-tested, evolutionarily appropriate food that supports brain development, energy, and cognition, provides nutrients without anti-nutrients, which we will cover later when speaking about fruits and vegetables. It's easily digested and absorbed, and supports gut and overall metabolic health. So here are some practical tips that you should follow when eating meat. Choose quality. Pasture-raised beef is going to be far healthier for you than eating cow that's raised in a factory. Now, don't take this to heart. Simply cutting out junk food is literally 99% of the process. So this is like an 80-20 rule. Include a variety of food. Include seafood, poultry, liver. I know a lot of you don't like liver. It's very micronutrient dense, very good for you. And the idea here is it doesn't have to be red meat every single day if you don't want to. You want to eat fresh and minimize processed meats, so freeze your meat if needed. Respect natural fats in meats. Don't cut out the fat, keep the fat in, and eat fattier slices of meat. Fat is not bad for you. Saturated fat is not bad for you. In fact, it's very nutritious. What you should be limiting though is conventionally raised chickens or pigs that were raised in factories, because the food that they eat is very grain-based, and thus a lot of their fat in their body is high linoleic acid, which is an omega-6, where it should be more DHA and EPA, but the way that their diet is structured, they can't really produce enough of that. You want to cook your meat gently, avoid charring meat or overcooking it so you can preserve all of its micronutrients, and portion appropriately. Roughly know your calorie needs and don't overdo the meat, because there is a possibility that you will take in too much protein. Now, is that really something that you should be worried about? Probably not, but if you want to stay in ketosis, protein does raise insulin, does increase glucose levels to some extent. Now let's talk about eggs. Eggs are the holy grail of nutrient-dense whole foods, with most of the magic being packed into the yolk. This is where all the micronutrients are. The yolk contains basically every single essential nutrient that you need for survival. I mean, think about it. A baby chick needs to grow up with the nutrients inside of the egg, where in contrast, the egg white around it is mostly just protein and doesn't have too many nutrients. It's there to protect the chick from various different viruses and bacteria. And so eggs are an absolutely phenomenal food, but for years it has been criticized, unjustly so, for causing various metabolic and cardiovascular issues. And the main one is the cholesterol issue, right? But the reasoning behind that went something like this. High blood cholesterol equals heart disease. Egg yolks are high in cholesterol. Therefore, eggs cause heart disease. This was overly simplistic and completely ignored the body's natural ability to regulate cholesterol. This is the updated scientific consensus. There is insufficient evidence that lowering dietary cholesterol reduces LDL, and dietary cholesterol has no appreciable effect on blood cholesterol levels. Your body will naturally adjust the cholesterol absorption and production to maintain balance. But if you don't believe me, go ahead and search it up. Search up, do eggs cause high cholesterol? The first thing you're gonna see on Google is no, it doesn't cause high cholesterol. This has been debunked and it's now common diet knowledge. Unfortunately, a lot of people are still stuck in their old ways and they're not going to be reciprocal to this knowledge. Now, as a little side tangent, there was a case study in the book. It's a case study, so it's not very credible, as the author mentioned herself, but there was an 80-year-old man who was eating 24 eggs per day for over over 15 years and his cholesterol levels remain completely normal, with only about 18% of the dietary cholesterol from his diet actually being absorbed. It's just the way the body works. The more cholesterol you eat, the less is going to produce by itself and the less is going to absorb. So if you eat a ridiculous amount of cholesterol, your body is just going to take it out as a waste product. And speaking of this, almost all of your cells have the ability to make cholesterol, meaning that dietary cholesterol isn't the biggest factor when it comes to overall cholesterol levels. There have been large studies showing that dietary changes and what diet you're eating, whether that's vegan, vegetarian, carnivore, keto, it has zero notable change on LDL cholesterol levels. Meaning that if you are vegan and you don't take in any dietary cholesterol, your body will thank you by producing a bunch of cholesterol by itself. Where if you eat a bunch of eggs every day, your body will just not absorb all the cholesterol. And so this is the yin and yang of cholesterol. Let's talk seed foods. So seeds like grains, legumes, nuts, and real seeds are very nutritious. They have a bunch of protein, they have a normal amount of carbs, and they're also typically higher in fats. They have tons of vitamins and minerals, and some seeds even have ALA, which is a precursor to omega-3 fatty acids. But the caveat here is seeds also have built-in chemical defenses. These defenses should, in theory, discourage animals from eating the seeds. So in the end, these are highly nutritious but also highly problematic. Here are the nutritional pros and cons of seeds. Pros: they contain all three macronutrients: fats, proteins, and carbohydrates. They provide B vitamins, vitamin E, and vitamin K1. And certain seeds supply a generous amount of ALA, which is a plant precursor to the anti-inflammatory omega-3 fatty acids, EPA and DHA. Now here are the cons and the risks. The first one is protein quality. Plant proteins, which in turn are seed proteins, typically are missing all the essential amino acids that you would find in animal products. They are significantly harder to digest. The omega-3 conversion of ALA into EPA and DHA is quite poor, with women roughly converting 0 to 4% and men converting around 9%. They have certain things in them called phytates, which bind to certain minerals and reduce their absorption and bioavailability. So if you're eating seeds, it may be harder for your body to absorb zinc, iron, calcium, magnesium, and copper. They have something called goitrogens, which is typically contained in soy that can interfere with thyroid hormones, and they also have lectins, which are shown to damage gut cells and are theorized to potentially transport toxins towards the brain. So keeping this in mind, how do we reduce anti-nutrients? There are certain preparation methods that will eliminate a lot of the downsides of seed foods if you choose to keep them in your diet. The first one is boiling. So you can pre-soak seeds for 12 hours and then just boil them for 15 to 60 minutes, which reduces a lot of the lectins that you will find in these foods. Sprouting and fermentation further reduces lectins and phytates, and dry heating, which is less effective. You can dry heat, roast, or even bake certain seed foods, but this will only remove around 75% of the lectins. But wait, did I say grains and legumes when talking about seed foods? Yes, I did. So when we think of grains like wheat, rice, and corn, we think of them as essential in our diets, or so we've been told. They provide complex carbs, they have a lot of fiber, but every single benefit of these grain products you can get more of from vegetables and fruits. When it comes to studies saying that whole grains are healthy for humans, it's typically comparing the standard, very refined, sugary American diet to a whole grain diet. And of course, if you switch from eating Pop-Tarts and start eating whole grain rice, of course you're gonna see health benefits. But you never see whole grain diets compared to grain-free diets. So evidence that grains are essential to the human diet is very, very limited. And keeping this in mind, if we look back in time, agricultural societies where people primarily ate grains, they were on average much shorter and malnourished compared to their hunter-gatherer counterparts, which suggests that having a high-grain diet contributes to reduced overall nutrient density. Now, when looking back to insulin, grains and legumes are also very high in carbs, which can worsen blood sugar and your control over insulin, especially in people who are already metabolically damaged or have some sort of insulin resistance. If you already have trouble tolerating carbs, then maybe having a bunch of grains and seed foods in your diet is not the greatest idea. Now, I can attest to this. Anecdotally, I don't eat a lot of grain-based carbs, and I also like fasting. There is a very substantial, noticeable cognitive difference when I'm fasted for 12 hours and I don't eat anything. As soon as I put any type of carb in my body, I instantly will feel it. So keeping this in mind, here are some practical recommendations. Limit grains and legumes to optimize brain and metabolic health. If you are going to consume seed foods, use soaking, boiling, sprouting, or fermentation to reduce the anti-nutrients. Limit soy and other goitrogenic seeds if thyroid function is a concern to you. And lastly, recognize the difference between diets for survival, which are high in grains, versus diets for optimal health. If we go back in time and we compare the hunter-gatherer societies to the agricultural societies, the only reason the agricultural societies actually flourished was because they had more access to food. It doesn't mean that they were healthier in any way. Living off of plants is simply easier than hunting animals. It doesn't mean that it was healthy in any way whatsoever. What about fruits and vegetables? So fruits and vegetables may both be plants, but they are vastly different. Fruits are specifically built to be eaten. Their sweetness, softness, and certain chemical compounds are literally biologically made for you to consume. Fruits are literally designed to be consumed by animals, have the seed pass through the digestive tract undisturbed, and then for you to poop it out in a further area so it could spread the plant. Imagine if we were back in the caveman times and you ate an apple. The seeds don't digest. The seeds are specifically coated so they come out in your poop and you carry the apple tree further away. Now, vegetables, on the other hand, are mostly designed to discourage consumption. They contain chemical defenses, which are certain toxins and anti-nutrients that will protect the plant from being eaten. So let's talk about plant defense mechanisms. Humans have developed multiple ways to protect themselves from certain plant toxins. The first one is bitterness. Our taste buds will instinctively avoid bitter compounds because it signals toxicity. Now, one interesting example that you can infer from this is children who do not want to eat broccoli aren't crazy. It's simply good evolutionary instinct. Over the hundreds of thousands of years that humans have been alive, our bodies have discovered that these bitter plants actually contain certain chemicals that we should not be consuming. The second defense mechanism is the gut barrier. Our intestinal lining filters these toxic plant chemicals. And the third mechanism is liver detoxification. Our liver will process any toxins that enter the bloodstream. So there's nothing too inherently bad about plant foods. But the problems arise when we overconsume certain plant foods and or the health of our gut, liver, or kidneys is compromised, which then consuming any amount of plant foods could overwhelm these defenses. Here's another way to think about it. This is a direct quote from the book. Some plants want you to eat their fruits, so they go out of their way to make them safe and appealing to you. But no self-respecting plant wants you to eat the rest of its body. So all vegetables, without exception, are trying to hurt you. Whether they succeed and how much harm they might do depends on the type of vegetable, how you prepare it, how much of it you consume, and how strong your defenses are. Now, fruits and vegetables are not all bad. They provide vitamins, specifically vitamin C, K1, B6, and B9. They have minerals such as potassium, magnesium, manganese, and calcium, and carotenoids, which then turn into vitamin A. So the problem here lies is that a lot of fruits and vegetables are very high in carbohydrate. And for metabolically healthy individuals, eating plants and vegetables is completely okay. But in people who are insulin resistant or diabetic, it will only worsen the condition. And so keeping with this theme, here are some plants that contain compounds which negatively affect the gut, thyroid, or nervous system, especially when consumed in excess. First, we have nightshades. So think tomatoes, eggplants, potatoes, peppers, and goji berries. They contain something called glycoalkaloids, which in a very summarized way are very minor neurotoxins that block acetylcholinesterase. Now, just a fun fact, if anyone else is a psychedelic nerd like I am, if you look at the nightshade family of plants, they're quite similar to the deadly nightshade family, which includes plants like datura, a plant that within its seed pods contains scopolamine, one of the most powerful delirium-inducing drugs. And if we compare it to the nightshade family, scopolamine also acts on acetylcholine. The pathways are a little bit different, but in a sense, the toxins are, kind of similar when you look at it. Cruciferous vegetables contain goitrogens that negatively impact thyroid function. Cassava contains cyanide, and from everything that I've read in the book, you should just completely avoid it. Sources online will tell you that you can eat up to this many grams of cassava per day, but why would you microdose yourself with cyanide daily? FODMAP-rich plants can trigger IBS in certain individuals, so maybe you should look into that. They could be avoided. And lastly, we have lectins and other seed-related toxins. You can find these in certain vegetables and legumes, which we'll cover in the practical part of this video, and these just disrupt certain brain functions in sensitive individuals. So what are the key takeaways? The dose will make the poison. Most fruits and vegetables are safe to consume in moderate amounts. Your individual tolerance matters. Some people, more than others, are gonna be sensitive to nightshade, cruciferous vegetables, or high FODMAP vegetables. Your metabolic status also matters. Insulin resistance and certain compromised organs can turn normally safe plant compounds into harmful stressors. And this is the nutritional reality of fruits and vegetables. Yes, they do contain a lot of vitamins and minerals, and for the metabolically healthy person, they are safe to consume. But at the end of the day, they are primarily carbohydrate. They will spike your insulin. Now, if you do need insulin, you are someone who works out every single day, you are low body fat, then it's okay to eat. But if you're trying to lose weight, maybe it's better to avoid these certain vegetables and fruits that are super high in carbs, have certain toxins, and don't have good vitamin bioavailability. So some practical guidance that I can give you when you want to test out certain vegetables is when you eat certain foods and vegetables, just see how they affect your brain. The other day, for example, I had eggs with 30 grams of honey, and after that, I felt perfectly normal, mentally sharp, everything was okay. A little bit later in the day, I had 130 grams of peanut butter, which technically contained less carbs than the eggs and honey, but after eating that, I felt severely inflamed. Your body is going to be different from mine, so see what works for you. You should limit and avoid plants that we will discuss later, which cause digestive issues, mental issues, and overall metabolic stress. You should favor fruits and vegetables that are well tolerated for you and are nutritionally dense, and don't fall for the propaganda that a rainbow diet must be followed to have optimal health markers. First and foremost, listen to your own body. Now let's talk about the superfood phenomenon and what science really says. When it comes to superfoods, it's mostly marketing driven as compared to actually being backed by science. Let's cover blueberries, dark chocolate, and red wine. They're frequently marketed as cognitive or disease-fighting powerhouses, right? But let's take a closer look. Blueberries were ranked at the top of the ORAC antioxidant scale, and then sold as brain boosters. But in reality, when put to the test, they showed zero significant changes in brain performance. A lot of these studies that came to the conclusion that blueberries are good for your health in any significant way compared to other fruits were usually observational studies, like previously in the video, which asked people how many blueberries they consumed throughout the year, and then compared that people who had more blueberries tended to score higher on certain tests. I'm not going to go into too much detail. You should read the book. It will tell you exactly which studies and compounds within the blueberries were falsely advertised and how you would have to eat a ridiculous amount of blueberries per day to even get enough of these certain compounds. Next, we have dark chocolate, which actually does show improved cognitive performances in flavanol-rich extracts. But as with the blueberries, basically all commercial bought dark chocolate is not rich enough in flavonols to produce these cognitive effects. You would have to eat nearly 20 chocolate bars to actually get these flavanol benefits, which at that point, is it really worth it? If you want to look deeper into this, you can actually purchase flavanol extracts, which then actually may help you. And red wine and resveratrol. A lot of the studies with resveratrol actually looked quite promising, and it's now been found that the amount of wine you would have to drink to get the same benefits of resveratrol that you would find in the studies is literally hundreds of bottles per day. And if we're trying to avoid inflammation, why would we want to consume that much alcohol? So in the end, superfoods are mostly marketing constructs. Whole plant foods are and can be healthy for you, but adding superfoods to your diet will not cancel out the excess amounts of refined carbs, sugar, and alcohol. True prevention comes from subtraction, reducing harmful compounds instead of adding exotic extracts. Once again, referring back to the sleep analogy I made, would it make sense to sleep 4 hours per night and then supplement 400 milligrams of caffeine every day? Or would it just be better to sleep 8 hours and not need all that extra coffee? Now, while on the topic of superfoods, I decided to do a fun little experiment. I clicked on an article containing this superfoods topic called Superfoods and Their Health Benefits by Bishal Minij, the usual suspect. And this is what came up. Top superfoods and their benefits. Number 1, berries. Number 2, leafy greens. Number 3, fatty fish. 4, nuts and seeds. 5, fermented foods. 6, dark tea. 7, dark chocolate. 8, turmeric. Look, you cannot be making this stuff up. This is literally media propaganda, copy and paste. Now, if you wanted a real superfood, I wonder why people never mention eggs or beef liver, or even beef itself, as I'm gonna put up a picture on screen and let's compare. Beef liver compared to blueberries or a leafy green vegetable has so many more nutrients. But no, it can't be good for you because it's red meat. What about this picture? Beef and beef liver compared to kale and blueberries once again. These red meat products beat out the so-called most nutritionally dense foods all the freaking time. And we're not even taking into account that when you're eating meat, the nutrients are far more bioavailable compared to leafy greens, where certain substances will not allow you to actually take in the nutrients even though they have them. So what is the practical approach here? Enjoy your chocolate, your wine, and other so-called superfoods in moderation, but focus on reducing refined carbs, seed oils, alcohol, and chronic overeating for real brain and metabolic protection. Now, if you went throughout this entire video and you still want to stick to a plant-based diet, I got you, but keep these considerations in mind. Vegan and vegetarian diets can improve metabolic and cardiovascular markers. But if you look into the research, which is better explained within this book, it's kind of funny how these researchers will come to these conclusions. They will put a standard person who eats horrible food on a vegan diet, force them to exercise, quit smoking, quit drinking for 6 weeks, and then when all of their health markers improve, they will come to the conclusion that it was because of the vegan diet. What do you think would be more powerful, quitting smoking and drinking or switching your diet? Probably quitting smoking and drinking, right? But of course, there are studies showing that if you switch from a horrible diet to a vegan or vegetarian diet, you are going to improve your health markers. But the critical point that you must understand is that removing animal foods alone will not improve your health metrics in any way. Once again, I'm not against vegetarian diets and or vegan diets, but this is what you should consider if you're going to go vegetarian or vegan. Watch out for vitamin B12 deficiencies, vitamin D deficiencies, zinc, iodine, EPA, and DHA, iron, and sometimes calcium. These nutrients are typically harder to obtain from plants, and they are very, very important in various different ways. So supplementation is often required. Once again, I'm not against the vegan or vegetarian diet, but you should watch other videos which will go into more detail about how to supplement vegan and vegetarian diets, because that's out of the scope of this video, and it would make it literally hours and hours long. Now, keeping this in mind, this is where you really should not go vegan. During pregnancy and early childhood, you should avoid vegan or vegetarian diets. Animal foods just simply provide the certain nutrients that are crucial to the brain. Breastfeeding mothers who are vegan typically produce milk low in B12, EPA, and DHA, and taurine, which is essential to infants. And many countries in Europe have actually made the vegan diet illegal for mothers who are bearing children due to the risk of non-reversible developmental deficits. So what are the key takeaways? Vegan and vegetarian diets can be healthy when having the right supplementation protocol. Pregnancy, breastfeeding, and childhood are high-risk periods where animal foods are biologically optimal for brain development, and real brain and metabolic health comes from removing harmful dietary inputs rather than adding in very niche extracts. Part 4. Hope is on the menu. Now that we've covered everything you need to know about food, let's get to taking action. As previously mentioned, your brain needs 3 key things from your diet: nourishment, protection, and energy. We will keep it all simple, focusing on single ingredient, minimally processed foods like eggs, fish, fruits, and vegetables. And circling back, this is the quiet diet approach. I'll put up pictures on screen, but here are the 3 steps we need to follow. Step 1 is quiet paleo, which we must do for 2 to 6 weeks. The base of this diet is from animal foods. It removes grains, legumes, dairy, refined carbs, alcohol, and processed foods. The goal of this diet is to reduce inflammation, stabilize glucose and insulin, and reset your metabolism. Step 2. We can transition into quiet keto, 6 to 12 weeks. This is a lower carb version of the paleo diet, and it will allow us to enter mild ketosis. The goal here is to improve mental clarity, our energy levels, and metabolic flexibility. And step 3, quiet carnivore, 4 to 6 weeks, is just a plant-free ketogenic diet approach for those with multiple food sensitivities. And once we are on carnivore for 4 to 6 weeks, we can reassess how we feel and slowly add in various foods into our diet and see how they interact with our metabolism, with our body, and with our brain. Here is a pro tip. Make changes step by step. I will put in some of the changes that you can make without jumping to certain diets that will drastically improve your quality of life. Don't overhaul everything at once. It's going to be too difficult and you're probably going to fail and relapse. We will come back to the exact protocols for these diets, but we should first talk about how to expand our diets once we stop this. The first thing you can do after being on these quiet diets is to see how various seed foods and nuts interact with your body. Test out different vegetables one at a time and see if they cause any feelings of lethargy or brain fog. And for more precise details, you can actually track your blood sugar and insulin levels to fine-tune your carbohydrate intake. So before we get on to the exact foods that you should be eating, here are the key principles. Prioritize nutrient-dense whole foods, remove foods that promote inflammation and oxidative stress, stabilize glucose and insulin for consistent brain energy, and use a stepwise approach to find your optimal diet. Here is a picture on screen that covers this in easier to understand fashion. We will start with the quiet paleo diet, and we can hold this diet for 2 to 6 weeks. If we're not getting enough relief from the quiet paleo diet, we can go to the quiet keto diet after 6 weeks. If we're feeling better, we can continue being on keto. If we don't feel better, we can go quiet carnivore, and so on. So let's cover the 3 diets in depth. Quiet paleo. The food list will be on screen, so just screenshot if needed. It's much easier for me to just put this image on screen than to go over every single food. This, according to the book, is what you should be eating. Keep your carbohydrate intake at a max of 100 grams per day. Do this for the specified amount of time and see how you feel. As a little tip, if you are someone that exercises, what I personally do is I keep my carbs under 100 grams for this experiment that I'm doing. But where I put my carbs is quite important. I put faster digesting carbs before my workout and after my workout. This is where the majority of the carbs will be in my diet. If you're someone that doesn't exercise, you don't have to follow these rules, just split out your carbs evenly, but I would recommend to not have carbs when you want to be the most mentally sharp. Now let's cover quiet keto. Once again, I'll put all the food lists on screen. With quiet keto, it's basically quiet paleo, but you take in almost no carbohydrates. I'd really recommend for you to read the book and the section on these quiet diets, as it really goes into more detail about how to execute them properly. But at the end of the day, if you just follow this food list, keep your carbs under 20 grams, you should be golden. Now, if you want, you can also try quiet carnivore. The food list, once again, is on screen and screenshot if needed. For all these diets, I'm going to create a Google Doc that's completely free. You can just press the second link in the description and it will take you to the exact outlines with all the screenshots, all the foods, and all of my notes on this section of the book. I highly recommend that you go to that Google Doc, because if you don't, you could just find the PDF online. That's also chill. You could just buy the book as well, but I went through all this trouble of reading this 300-page book, so you don't have to. So you can just save a bunch of time. With all of these out the way, here are some practical tips that are going to help you in your journey. Do a kitchen detox. Remove sugar, vegetable oils, dairy, grains, legumes, processed foods, and alcohol. Instead, stock up on fresh and frozen meat, seafood, poultry and eggs, fresh or frozen fruits and vegetables, healthy fats like olives, olive oil, avocado, and non-dairy animal fats. Speaking of meal timing and fasting, look into intermittent fasting, as it can lower insulin levels and almost immediately reveal food sensitivities. And it's also recommended that you skip snacking, but if you do insist on having snacks, consider something that is lower in carbohydrate. Now, talking about sweeteners and caffeine, when it comes to sweeteners, stick to allulose, erythritol, monk fruit, and stevia. Avoid honey, maltitol, xylitol, and other artificial sweeteners. And with caffeine, you can try to lower your caffeine dose or do a bit of a caffeine detox. Now, I have a lot of personal things to say about this. I love artificial sweeteners, so I don't know if I'll be cutting them out. And I know this book says not to use honey, but that's my preferred method of carbs. I'll take in 30 grams of honey before a workout. I'll have honey and eggs after my workout. It doesn't really seem to make me too foggy, but as always, see what works for you. And for caffeine, I'm a big proponent of cycling stimulants. If you are using caffeine daily, caffeine is a drug and it's going to build up a tolerance to the point where there is going to be no point in drinking it. I highly recommend that once every couple months, you do an entire week of not drinking caffeine, which will usually reset your tolerance back to zero and make 1 cup of coffee hit like 4 cups of coffee. I've also had periods in my life where I would literally not use caffeine for months on end, and you could also consider trying that. With social life or traveling, you can order more compliant dishes at restaurants. If you're going out to a gathering where you can bring your own food, just bring your own food. And overall, plan ahead. Don't be a child. You're an adult. Hopefully, if you're watching this video, just package your things in Tupperware. Trust me, people respect you more when you bring your own food to places. And if you're really gonna have to eat somewhere at a restaurant or something along those lines, keep in mind that if you have an 80-20 principle in your life, it should be fine. If 80% of the time your diet is basically on point and you have a cheat meal once a month, twice a month, it's not the end of the world. Really, perfection isn't required. My diet is very, very clean, but once in a while, once a month, I'll have junk food. I might feel horrible that day, but it's one day out of the month. Is it really the end of the world? No. And if you are gonna have these cheat foods, try to keep them within the bounds of the healthy paleo diet. It's much better to overeat on fruits than to overeat on Twinkies and other highly processed junk food. Because as I previously said, when I have these cheat days where I do eat some junk food, I can feel it in my body. I can feel that I am not 100% there in the brain for maybe 2 or 3 days after that food. So be very careful with this. Now about some other additive lifestyle integration things that you could do to better every physical issue in this book. These are going to be the standard blah blah things that your doctor or physician is going to tell you. You can exercise. Specifically, high intensity interval training is the best for glucose management from everything that I've seen. Avoid addictive foods. There are countless videos that I have made where I have explained that the primary cause of being overweight and a bunch of the health problems that come from that is how tasty food is. Try to avoid the more addictive foods. Your brain and your dopamine system will adapt over time. That boring vegetable on your plate will start to look tasty if you stop stimming your brain with highly processed foods. And lastly, just switch your mindset. Every time you say no to unprocessed foods, you say yes to your health. Figure out why the hell you're doing this and keep that in the back of your head every time you want to eat junk food. Just remember how terrible you're going to feel, and that might help you with the cravings. So with everything that we've learned in this video, you can now understand that your mental health and brain function isn't just a consequence of genetics and stress. It's all heavily influenced by your diet. And the diets in this book aren't gimmicky. It's a form of self-experimentation that you can do to figure out what fuels your body best. Now, if you find this video helpful and you trust me enough, press the first link in the description and join our community where you can find more in-depth courses on nutrition, muscle growth, and weight loss that will fast track your journey to success. Thank you for watching.